All right, here we go. OverDrive off and running. TSN 1050 on the TSN app. Your home smart speaker up on TSN Plus. Bryan Hayes, Frankie Corrado, Jason Strudwick. How we feeling, boys? Day after Canada Day. The long weekend is officially a thing of the past. But here we are working, right? We're working. I don't know who else is working around here, but we're putting in time and effort. How's everyone doing?
We're always working, buddy. We're always working. We were working yesterday. We're working today. It's all good. It's all good.
It.
We're here we go. We're into the summer. I feel like things are a little more casual, a little more relaxed now that it's July. I don't know how you guys feel.
I would say that's accurate.
Oh, grinding.
Yeah, you're grinding, Strud. I mean, I get the impression like we've got some – we should do like a vibe check thing today where maybe we can represent the different Canadian hockey markets after a day like yesterday, where I think in Toronto.
Okay.
I think we can do a vibe check thing. Right?
Where do you want to start? Where do you want to start?
Yeah,
here's
which
my impression.
team?
Let me speak for what I'm getting out of Edmonton, right? Like Jeff Skinner is the equivalent of, Pavel Bure going to Florida back in the day. Like, just an unbelievable get. A great get. I like that signing. I think it's being a little bit, overstated in terms of what he might bring to the table, but I like the signing. But I think it's more about the symbolism of Skinner going there, of Janmark staying, of Brown staying. Like, they all smell a Stanley Cup in Edmonton, so I think it's very positive in Edmonton. In Toronto, I think it's positive. I think, most people like the moves. They feel like they're a better team today. Vancouver, I think it's positive. And then I have a tough time trying to figure out where people are at. Am I reading that correctly? Toronto, Edmonton, Vancouver, positive. Montreal kind of dormant, the Slavkovsky contract. They didn't do much else.
I said that's fine for
trying
them.
To figure it out.
I said that's fine for Montreal. They don't need to start spending money just to spend money. Like they got a long-term goal in mind, and if they stick to that, they're going to be okay. They didn't need to expedite anything.
I agree.
Moving on. What else you got?
Okay. All right.
Where are we?
All right.
Well, Winnipeg.
Go ahead,
Let's
Strud.
talk about
Do you have a city you want to throw out, Strud? You can go ahead.
Yeah, I got Winnipeg. They leave or lose, Monahan and, of course, Dillon and Laurent Brossoit. So, these aren't super, super elite players, but they're pretty good. They helped out. They're there all the time.
I agree.
And that team has been – how many years have they kind of – I've always felt like this year they win the Stanley Cup. Right? I've done that a couple times, and I've always been disappointed. And, Scheifele's been there a long time. Hellebuck's been there a long time. And it just always feels like it doesn't quite get over the goal line. What's on paper, to me, doesn't always equate to the success. So now, are they better today than they were yesterday? I have a hard time seeing how.
No, definitely not. They've taken a step back with, who they acquired with Monahan, with Toffoli. Brossoit was a good backup. Like, he played well behind Hellebuck, and that was their bread and butter. So, yeah, I think if you're in Winnipeg, you can't be overly positive right now. So
here's what I'll say. Here's what I'll say. I love Winnipeg. I enjoyed going there as a player. I loved playing in that building. Unbelievable atmosphere. I even loved playing there when I was a nobody in the minors. Love everything about Winnipeg.
Okay.
Enjoy doing the Jets broadcasts.
Yes.
I can't say enough great things about Winnipeg. So, I don't know. That's kind of all I got to say. That's kind of all I got to say.
I saw a little back and forth online
and that's not about
prior
the
to
team.
coming on, and I don't know if you want to address that, but what was it? Bob Irving took issue with something you said. Is that what it was, Frank? Like, I'm assuming you're being facetious talking about the weather like we do about every single Canadian market. We all play the same game. And they took issue with that, and I don't know. What's going on out there?
I'll explain myself here.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm talking to Jay last night, and we're going through all 7 Canadian teams. We're doing like a 35-minute hit, and we're taping it, and there's, pieces that have to come in and out. Anyways, Jay kind of teed me up on there's certain obstacles and hurdles that come, being the Winnipeg Jets on a day like that. And we just mentioned it. They lost Monahan. They lost Toffoli. They bought out Schmidt. They didn't really replace him. They lost their backup goalie. Wasn't exactly a great day for the Winnipeg Jets. Now, that leaves an opportunity for some younger players to now take the next step in that organization, so that you can be optimistic about that. But what I said was the Winnipeg Winters, and maybe I said minus 42, okay? It's not for everyone.
I'm sure. I'm sure you're laying it on thick because it's the entertainment business we're in.
Thank you. And then I said, quoted as saying, great market, great place to play. And that is not what was quoted by someone else and someone on our team here. So anyways, moral of the story, I love Winnipeg, love the Jets regionals, love everything about the team, the city, the arena. Couldn't say enough great things about Winnipeg. So
all right. Well, I'm glad you clarified that. For the record, that's not where I was going with the vibe check. I was going to goof on Edmonton. That's what I was trying to do. Struddy was kind of take shots at you because I think the mood out there, it's got to get dragged back a little bit. Come on, what are we talking about out there? Everyone's so jacked up about everything. But I'm glad you addressed that because I did see the one tweet. We don't have to get into everything, but listen. And I'm the king of it, putting it on thick and doing things for effect and saying things that are sarcastic or whatever. And, we got 7 Canadian markets up here. And Strud, I thought, I slept on what you said yesterday, and I have a great appreciation for what you said because I came in, woe is me, like I've been known to do at times if you listen or watch this show.
What? No.
Woe is me.
Don't beat yourself up.
Woe is me. Woe is the Toronto market. Woe is the Canadian hockey scene. And, I was laying it on thick, the Reinhart contract, and what about in Vegas and Dallas? And you basically smacked me around and said, please just shut up. Like, stop doing that because we don't need to have that approach. And I appreciate that. And I rescind my comments yesterday, and I'm puffing my chest out as a Canadian.
I love it.
And I'm saying, let's go get this thing. Like, let's go get this. Who cares if Sam Reinhart's signing for $8.6 million? Whatever. All right, they got their cup. Prior to them winning a cup, like you said yesterday, they had a 15 to 20-year run where they were barely in the league. Like they never made the playoffs. No one was showing up. They had no profile whatsoever. So I think what I came out of it, in terms of your commentary yesterday, thinking about it last night, is the importance of drafting and developing. Yesterday doesn't have to mean that much if you got a farm system that's pumping out talent. And I don't know if that comes up enough in these Canadian markets. The 30-year drought, the woe is me, that, again, I've been driving that bus a lot, how about just draft and develop properly? And then these players, it doesn't matter what they're going to ask for 7 or 8 years down the road. They're under your team control, and they're 21 years old, and they can help you win a cup.
So this is my wheelhouse. This is something I've been preaching for a long time. And I played in multiple markets, big markets in the States, and obviously anyone in Canada. It's really good. The challenge I think that Canadian teams have is their lack of patience. Right, you're trying to force feed. We're trying to speed this thing up. Here specifically in Edmonton, I can't remember what GM said, but once I got McDavid, I want to speed this thing up. I don't believe you can speed things up. Things play out as they go. You have to be patient. And you look at some of the trades, even though Anthony, they traded for Anthony with the Oilers. That's 2 second-rounders. Like, that's not a trade. There's no rush for that. There's no need to do that. They look at Winnipeg. They probably could have kept Monahan if they signed him for 5 years. I'm sorry, 5 years for Sean Monahan. Last year he got a 1-year deal. And the Flames traded him away. Now I recognize there's some injury issues in there, but this player was traded twice for a first-round pick. So, Schmidt, they bought him out, and Dylan I think is a really good player, but 4-year deal like that age, you're getting up there. So I think for these teams you have to think about what are we trying to accomplish and what's our time horizon. And the idea of speeding up, I don't get it. I just there's things take time, and I'll give credit to Utah. Bill Armstrong's been down there underneath it for a long time, right? And he had thousands of picks, and he was patient. And he was taking on bad contracts and all that stuff, and guys that weren't even playing. Now he's going to Utah. It's not going to be so easy. You know why? He doesn't have all those picks. He doesn't have guys to dish off, and I doubt he'll be taking on a lot of bad contracts. So now
he can spend some money now, though.
He can spend money, but still, you got to get those contracts right. Not every contract that was signed yesterday is going to be a slam dunk. Oh, yeah, that was great, looking back 5 years ago. So now it gets a little bit easier. You can spend money, and I like the moves he did. But now I think is a time where you've had 1,000 picks. Are those players developing? Are they helping on your team? Then who are you bringing in to help those guys and build around it? I think it's an interesting case study for any franchise to look at.
I think it's
great
point.
You could go around Canada in the last 15 years, and you can find examples where they did exactly what you just talked about, Struddy, where they they tried to expedite things. What did Ottawa try to do with Pierre Dorian there? Like, it was like, we won the offseason. DeBrincat, we got Chychrun, we made all these moves. Where did he get them? Now the regime that's there, they're trying to clean up that mess. Vancouver for years was like, we're going to throw all kinds of money at the offseason. OEL, $8 million, the big trades, never got them anywhere. Now Rutherford and Alvin had to clean things up. What did Brendan Shanahan say when he first got to Toronto? It's easy to have a plan. It's hard to stick with the plan. And regardless of how things have moved here in Toronto, whether, you want the core four broken up or not, he has stuck to that, and that's, going back to 2014. So that was one of the first things he said, and he has still stuck to that to this day, kind of not abandoning his plan at the first whim of a change, a potential change.
Yeah, I think that is something that needs to be remembered, and it's very difficult to do so, that you don't win any games because of signings you made on July 1st. Right? Like, those players are likely going to help you win games in the future, but they didn't hand a cup out yesterday, right? Like, no one was parading their streets with a free agency cup, because you made all these moves, where often that happens. We award the winners of the offseason, and it doesn't necessarily materialize to anything. And then you get stealth mode teams that are very quiet and just methodically going about their business, and all of a sudden you realize, wow, look at the way they operate. And, Ottawa, again, not to dump on them, but that's a perfect example. Like, they went out and they're like, we got to get DeBrincat. 1 year later, okay, he's out of here. And that was because he wanted to go. Got to get Chychrun. Okay, now they just got to basically move on from him. Nick Jensen's a good player. He's not a great player, though. They get Jensen in a third for Chychrun. Think about what they paid for him. Got to get Korpisalo. Got to get Murray. Nothing worked. And now we'll see if Stamkos and company have the ability. They're in a tough spot, though, because they got a new owner. They got an impatient fan base. They got players on that team that have been through it. Brady Tkachuk doesn't want to hear about a 5-year plan. Like, he wants to get going right now. Batherson wants to get going right now. Shabbat and Sanderson, et cetera. But I think you look at Montreal, like, Montreal's an example of it, where they have faith in their market. They have faith in their history. They have faith in their owner. And, like, Jeff Gorton got there, and he implemented a plan that was going to take years. And they want to get cooking. They want to start winning. But they've basically done nothing. And they'll still add a piece or two. But what they're doing is drafting and developing and bringing in youth, and they're going to let them all come out together. And I think they're also waiting their time out. They're waiting for the Leafs in Boston and Florida and Tampa to go over the hill a bit, and then there are the Habs. And I think that's 2 or 3 years down the road. So I think if you're a ticket holder, or if you're a Montreal Canadian fan, and I'll give credit to the Habs fans, just like I give credit to the Leaf fans a decade ago. They're the smartest fans out there. Like, Canadian hockey fans get it. They know it's not good enough. They know it's going to take time, and they know what they want. They want sustained success, and they want a true crack at winning. In order to do that, it takes time. But you got to have the patience, because there are shiny toys on July 1st, and there are shiny toys at the trade deadline. And, they're shiny for a reason, but they're not yours, and they shouldn't be yet.
In Montreal there, after that cup run, Hayes, everyone got extended, right? Like, it was, in and around there. It was Gallagher, it was Anderson, it was Armia, Dvorak came in. Like, they spent a lot of money thinking that they could keep that going. Ultimately, that wasn't the case. So they're going to have, in the next 3 years, they'll have a lot of significant money coming off the books. And, they're not going to buy guys out right now. If they can make a trade, to get those guys to contending teams and bring in young players or picks, I'm sure they will go down that road. But here's the one thing that Montreal has that they're kind of using with all these young players that they're drafting and developing, Marty St. Louis. Like, I think Marty St. Louis is such a key figure for all those young guys to kind of have that mentorship, head coach figure. Look what he did with Slavkovsky in the second half of the season on. Like, that was such a work in progress from year 1 to year 2. And now the guy signs an 8-year extension. He's $7.6 million, and he's a 50-point guy. He could be a 70-point guy next year. And a lot of that has to do with Marty. A lot of Cole Caulfield's success. Marty, Nick Suzuki, like, that's a very influential person in that organization for what they are doing and the patience that's involved with that model, with that draft and development model.
So there you go.
going back to Ottawa, I think that Steve Sales has time. And I understand that those players want to get going, to use your words, Hayes, but it doesn't mean it's the right thing. Like, my kids want to open their Christmas gifts 5 days before Christmas. I don't let them. That's not the way you do it, right? You need to give them time. So I honestly think that Sales has to figure out what he has, how he's going to move forward and try to grow the players around them. And in the minors, and make some shrewd moves, but don't just, go. And this is the last piece. Mm-hmm. We saw Milan Lucic come to Edmonton. And oh, this is it. This is the final piece, and it didn't end up being that final piece, right? And not to blame him or one way or another, but it's an example of where you need to just keep chipping away all the time. Every move you make, you get a little bit better. And I think Steve Sales will take that approach. I'm really keen to watch him because I would think that his owner, who he's worked with before in junior, will understand how that's Sales doing. So I don't expect a ton of huge moves. I know he's done the goalie.
Yeah, I hope you're right, Struddy, and I think that's correct. And I think the kids in Christmas analogy is accurate, but I don't think your kid's 6'3", 240 named Brady that's going to come stare at you and say, actually, man, I've been here for 6 years. And yeah, you're right. He, like, Brady Tkachuk doesn't get to run the whole show. That's the job of Sales. But doesn't mean it's been
done right. If it had been done right, they wouldn't be in this situation.
Absolutely.
So it hasn't been done right up to this point. So someone has to do it right. Someone has to say, this is how we do it. And Brady, I'm this is the way it is. We know you're a captain. We need you to buy in because this is how it looks a good team. This is how it builds. It's not just willy-nilly trading for DeBrincat out of nowhere and hoping it just fixes the problem. It doesn't work that. I'm not familiar with those type of rebuilds working.
No, they don't. They generally
look
don't.
at Tampa. Tampa, they are to me the template of how you do it. Consistently adding year after year, drafting, developing, giving your team a chance to win. That's how it's done.
Well, and they had their core set too, right? Like that is the drafting difference where, Ottawa's still figuring out what their core is, and a lot of those guys are growing. Stützle's still young, Sanderson's still young. Like taking Edmonton, you know who they are. Like McDavid is what he is. Draisaitl is what he is. Hyman is. Nugent Hopkins is what he is. Nurse, obviously, we know what happened through the playoffs, but he's an established veteran that you're aware of the fact that he's going to be professional and nothing's going to throw him off his game, or he's going to be aware of, the inner workings of the NHL. So it's easier to add a piece. Tampa the same. I would say Toronto's in the same boat. You can just throw a guy in there and it's not going to destabilize anything, where with younger teams it may be the case. And I think probably the best example of this, and I'm curious to see where it goes, is down in Chicago because – a lot of people approach that Chicago team like where you got Bedard, so you can't just be awful. It's like, well, it might be in your best interest, and I know that's tough for him, but he's going to have to chew on it for a few years. But when McDavid arrived, it was all right. Let's bring in Griffin Reinhart. We don't need another pick. We got the big guy. It's like,
two picks for him.
You traded away I think he turned into Barzell, I believe was the pick that went the other way.
A first and a second rounder for Griffin Reinhart.
And that was I remember it. I was at the draft. It was the 16th overall pick. The Islanders took Barzell. How would that look? That'd probably be beneficial a few years ago. And like you said, go get Milan Lucic and because you got to get going because you got McDavid. And really they needed to wait probably a little bit longer. It all worked out because they still made it to the Cup. They've been a really good team for years, and McDavid is basically foolproof. He's so good, and Leon's so good, and but yeah, you're right.
The Chicago thing, I don't mind it, Hayes, because they didn't hand out a lot of term. Like those contracts, I think the longest one is Bertuzzi at 4 years. So you're not tied to those guys. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, Stardy. The Milan Lucic, that was a long one, right? Was that a
7-year deal?
7-year deal.
7 year.
So like, I feel like these are they're almost placeholders to just make sure that team doesn't get caved in every night, and the kid Bedard gets the feeling of the competitive nature of the NHL, and it's not like they roll into Tampa or they roll into Boston and Florida, and it's like this could be 6-1, this could be 7-1. Like just to know that you're in a game every single night.
San Jose. Yeah, you nailed it. I think that to me, if I was Chicago, I'd be looking at the Oilers, what they've done and how they handled this guy, or Pittsburgh. What did they do right? What did they do wrong? And it's, everyone's opinion would be different, but what do you think they did right or wrong? And I like your point, so well made, Franklin. Like, they got this figured out. They have it. Just smaller, shorter contracts, guys to insulate them. And I give San Jose credit. Mike Greer, he's brought in some guys to do similar things. The guys that he's brought in, they're on waivers, on signing. When the team is good, those guys are going to be like you and me. They're not even going to be there. And quite frankly, probably the same in Chicago. So, but you need to insulate them and give those guys a chance to see what it feels like to be around pros that know how to play and are hard workers. Like last year's San Jose's team, I'd have a hard time believing it was much better than a good AHL team. Like that was a really weak team.
They were horrendous.
And
they were horrendous.
Like the Hershey Bears won. The Hershey Bears won the Calder Cup. What do you think that would have looked like? Hershey versus the San Jose Sharks.
And it's crazy. I mean, so the fans, like, they take it off the chin. But also those young players in that dressing room, they take it off the chin. So, like, I'm sure they do research, but I don't know how we can see the same mistakes happening over and over again, right? Or the same decisions being made. So I think Chicago, hopefully they've avoided some of the same that we've seen from other pitfalls.
Well, the other thing, like when I played in Toronto, we were bad. We were a last place team. I remember that summer. Like, I was in Vancouver, but obviously I followed Toronto and everything they were doing. They signed all these guys to, like, 1-year deals in hopes of flipping them at the deadline. So all those guys that are on 1-2-year deals, they're almost like they're there for a little bit, but they might be gone by the deadline. So you try and, recoup more assets that way.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying with draft and develop is you're not always going to hit. And yes, if you draft and develop so many good players, you're going to lose some of them. Talk to the 2011 Chicago Blackhawks, where they were so loaded it was like we're going to lose 5, 6, 7 guys. But what it allows you to do is you don't have to overcompensate on July 1st because you have faith guys are coming, right? Like if you have guys coming that are constantly pushing and pushing and pushing, maybe you don't grab that 7th defenseman for $2.5 million because you got a kid coming who's 21 who's going to make $900,000 and is better already. And that's the point. Then he moves up and the other guy moves up and the other guys push and push and push. And it just softens the blow when you inevitably do lose people, or it makes it easier for you to say goodbye. Love you. You're awesome. I'm not giving you $10 million because this other kid's coming and he may not be you yet, but he's going to be you at some point and he's cheap. Like that's the nature of football, it's the nature of hockey, it's the nature of every sport. You got to have a farm system that keeps cooking. Goes a long, long way. All right, I would say Tampa has been the epicenter of the hockey world the last 48 hours, including, and it's been reported that this was a coincidence. Victor Hedman has signed a 4-year extension at $8 million per year, which is exactly the contract Stamkos signed in Nashville. 4 years, $8 million. So Hedman's got a year left on his deal and then 4 more at 8, which is just an incredible contract. I think he's still one of the 5 or 6 best defensemen in the league.
Should he get Drew Doughty money? Like Hedman would fall into that category, wouldn't he?
Yes, exactly. Like, do you know who I am and what I've done and what I do for you? Like, if he asked for 10, what are they going to say? No.
That's $8 million seems low for a guy
like
that.
But in 4 years. 4 years. I don't need to burn you on the back end. Don't worry, man. When my wheels fall off, I'll just go back to Sweden. It's all good.
It just feels like that's kind of the, everyone's bought in there. $8 million's good. I'm happy with it. I don't need to take you for 10, 11.
Right.
That's just kind of how we do things.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a possibility that the Stamkos scene made Hedman realize I better not ask for more because it's not coming. Like they were working on this deal for a long time anyway. But I do wonder if it's like just get it done, please. I don't need, Julien BriseBois turning on me here and wondering if I need to be a part of the program in the future. So Erik Erlendsson will join us. Been covering the Lightning for a long, long time. His take on the Stamkos scene, what it could mean for the room, Hedman's deal, what's up with the state of Florida versus the world, the Panthers, the Lightning, everything they've managed to do over the last number of years. We got Johnny on the show today. Mike Johnson coming up, confirm or deny. Jay's back in action tonight after a loss yesterday. They remain 8 games under 500. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa now on the IL. Everyone's on the IL, effectively. And Steve Phillips will join us in a couple of hours to get his take on that. We're tracking Copa America. Some really tough news in camp for the Canadiens today. Tejon Buchanan left. It looks like a gruesome lower body injury. We'll keep you up to date on that, but he will more than likely not be available for them anytime soon. Big part of their program. So we'll keep you updated on that. And the Euro's continuing as well. Frankie Corrado in here. Struddy's in here. I'm Bryan Hayes. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN Plus. All right, the Jays are back in action tonight, and we'll get you an update on who's available to actually play, because now Kiner-Falefa's on the IL. But the arms, it doesn't feel like Jordan Romano's in a good place. We know Eric Swanson's been in the minors. He's not even a part of this team, and they designated for assignment Tim Mesa. late last week or over the weekend. So, like, coming into the season, it was going to be Meza into Swanson into Romano. That's troublesome, right? When three of your big arms, if not your biggest arms out of the bullpen, are either just not a part of your program anymore or nowhere close to being a part of your program. Also, those are guys, we talked about it for 20 minutes in the NHL, like trade deadline stuff, having assets to move. Like, if those guys were humming, you could get a boatload for a Romano or a Swanson or, situational lefty like Meza, and they're just not even available to trade if you're the Blue Jays. So it's not a good scene. You got Houston in town, and of course Houston's cooking. Like, they go to the playoffs every single year. They win World Series, and they had a brutal start. A lot of that was injury-related, and now they're red hot. And it kind of feels like they're going to make the playoffs again. Meanwhile, like 2 weeks ago, they were chasing the Jays. So speaks to the way they operate and maybe the way the Blue Jays are currently operating. So more on that in a couple of hours. Mike Johnson's still to come. Confirm or deny in about an hour. See, Bronny James and J.J. Redick are quickly becoming acquaintances, right, out in L.A., How often does a second-round pick get a press conference, Strud? You always goof on Toronto for the press conferences. When does a second-round pick get a presser with a coach? When does that happen?
I feel badly for Bronny James. The guy can't win. And to be fair, I've watched some highlights of him. So if he is really good, people say, well, it's just because his dad coached him. If he's not that good and he's playing there, it's like, well, because his dad got him there. Like, the guy can't win.
No, he can't.
I think it would be better for him to go to another team and go somewhere else and create his own identity. And I think as a dad, that's probably what I would do. Now, obviously, I don't have a shadow like LeBron James does, but I feel bad for the kid. I think Bronny's in a really tough spot.
Yeah.
Hope it works out for him.
I hope it does, too. I mean, I have nothing against the kid. I'm kind of rooting for the whole story and all that. And it'll be cool to see him and LeBron play. But, yeah, he's staying in L.A. And yet yesterday, we were talking about all these different stories around the hockey world. And I said on the show, I think most people would concede, like, what we will remember 2024 free agency in the NHL is the day that Stamkos left Tampa. Like 16 years, first overall pick, longtime captain, 2 cup wins, went to 4 cup finals, and see you later. You're out. Ruthless. It is a business. And then Hedman signed today. To chat about it, we're joined now by longtime Lightning insider and the host of the Lightning Insider Hockey Podcast. Here's Erik Erlendsson. How you doing, Erik?
I'm good, gentlemen. How are you today?
We're doing very well. Can you describe, like, what's the mood? What are your listeners? What are your readers? What's the general reaction here to Stamkos basically being told it's not going to work here anymore, you got to go somewhere else?
Anger, contempt, frustration. That's a good portion of the reaction to this. I mean, Julien BriseBois held his press conference yesterday after everything went down, and I think he might have gotten one question about Jake Gensel. Pretty good player. Brought into Tampa Bay, not a topic of conversation. All the questions were around Steven Stamkos. Victor Hedman signed his extension today. Doesn't kick in until next year. Nobody's asking Victor Hedman about his extension. Everybody's asking Victor Hedman about not playing with Steven Stamkos anymore. He's an iconic player, legendary player in the Tampa market, probably arguably the greatest athlete to come through the Tampa Bay sports market, and that includes guys like Leroy Selman, and Tom Brady was there for a short period of time, and arguably the most popular athletes in the Tampa Bay area. So with everything and how it went down, I'd say there's a lot of fan resentment to how it all went down and not seeing a guy like him finish his career with the franchise he started.
So if you were watching this play out from the outside and you're not privy to anything that happened on the inside, you would just see, star player, captain of the team, no negotiations or maybe minimal negotiations, go right down to the wire, and it's a cutthroat decision and the player's gone. Yeah. But if you're on the inside, like, were there any signs maybe internally that this might be headed this way? Was there any animosity? Like, you only know what you can see from the outside. What was happening on the inside there?
Yeah, nothing that you could see, right? Like, when we got to training camp in September, Steven had mentioned how he was frustrated there hadn't been any discussions because he was eligible, just like Victor Hedman, to sign an extension July 1 of last year. Not only did that not happen, there hadn't been any discussions. Julien came out and said, I need more information. We won't hold discussions till the end of the season. But I don't know, from even somebody who's kind of, inside a little bit you never got this sense that it was going to get to this point. You just felt like, okay, they're just going to get it done, right? It's Steven Stamkos. They're just going to find a way to get it done. And then, the way the season ended, he was on a tear. He was their best player in the playoffs. And Julien came out the next day after they were eliminated by Florida and said, I've already reached out to Stammer's agent. We're going to start discussions. You're like, okay, this is where it gets done. And then the trail just kind of went cold. There were some initial conversations early on in early May. And then all of a sudden there was nothing for like a few weeks. And, it kind of left one side wondering, well, what's going on here? And then you listened to Steven yesterday talk about, he felt like he was the only one giving concessions and everything like that. That's where you kind of get a sense of how the negotiation went. Basically, it can be a cold business sometimes, and that's where it kind of got cold, right? Steven, articulated his frustration with the entire process, and the Lightning and basically said, this is the only offer we can give you. We're not going to go higher. If you want it, it's yours. If not, we're going to move on. And, he opted to move on.
From the distance, from the outside, to use Frankie's words, I feel like BriseBois felt it was time. It was time to move on. And that is very cold.
Hard.
But I because you get it done. Like if it's your captain, usually you get it done. Now Stamkos is 34, banged in 40 goals last year. The 4-year contract, maybe it doesn't age well, but what else? If it's not that, what else can it be? Because I just don't understand how this doesn't happen.
Well, if you understand the way that Julien and the front office staff kind of look at things, they really do a good job of taking a step back and removing emotion out of some of these decisions and look at numbers. And, not that it's all based on analytics and numbers like that, but they do take a step back and use that to kind of be a big part of their decision-making process. And, his 5-on-5 play has slipped. There's no doubt. I think if you look at the numbers, it'll tell you that. So maybe that's how they recognize it. But it's still hard to think that, they weren't going to bring their captain back, a guy who's meant so much to the franchise and everything he's been through with the injuries and the ambassador that he is and everything else, that, they couldn't find a way to make it work and be, put a respectable number in front of him that, he would take a discount to stay. It just never got to that point. And this is where I give Julien a lot of credit. He knew the way that this was playing out, he was going to take the heat. And he is taking the heat, and it's going to continue to be that way. We're going to get to training camp in September. You're going to look around. There's going to be no 91. The same questions are going to pop up. How do you replace him? How do you deal with this? How come he's not here? And that's going to go on. And if they get off to a slow start, it's going to be the same way. So I do give Julien BriseBois a lot of credit here because he knew this was going to be a completely unpopular decision, and he went and did it anyway. That is a hard thing to do sometimes in a general manager role.
Well, on top of that, an owner's got to sign off on something like this. Let's not let the owner off the hook. Like a move like Steven Stamkos leaving after 16 years. Like Stamkos could probably call the owner direct and say, you're telling me I got to leave? I probably would if I was in his shoes. I mean, you're right. Everything you said about BriseBois is accurate. But he doesn't, I don't believe, he has the autonomy to make a move like this without the owner saying, absolutely, go for it.
And the head coach. The head coach has to be on board with this stuff, too. And John Cooper's been, obviously, in Tampa Bay for more than a decade, longest tenured coach. But Julien is the one taking all the heat for it publicly. And that's, whether that's right or wrong, it's just the way it is. But you're right. This is not a single decision by one guy. This is a collective decision. Everybody has to be signed up for it. He's just the guy taking the heat with the questions.
So, if you go back, you do the history lesson, everyone got taken care of, right? Even the guys that got shipped out, like someone like Sergachev gets shipped out, but he got taken care of, contractually. I guess my question, my point is, being up close and personal there, like, how did Steven handle seeing every single person get taken care of? Meanwhile, it's just him. He's kind of just getting dragged along, and he's got to go right down to the wire. And then it's crazy that they can't find, $6 million for him. Like, this is a guy that left money on the table the first time around, go back to Tampa. He probably would have left money on the table to stay there again, but he's not going to go down to $3 million, when he's got $8 million somewhere else. He would probably take $6 million to stay there, but that's a pretty big discrepancy.
It is, and and listening to Julien talk about it yesterday, this was very interesting to me. And this is where I talk about he's so analytical in the way that he approaches and the research that they put in. He talked about all these top-level players who are reaching their fourth contract, right? And this was Stammer's third. You come out of your entry level, you sign the extension. The next one, you sign the extension. Now it's the fourth contract. And he mentioned the Bergerons and the Kopitars and the Chris Letang's and Evgeny Malkins. None of them signed their fourth contract before it expired, except for Anze Kopitar. So, like you talk about the analytical way that Julien BriseBois approaches it, he looked at all that, did the research on it, and that's probably what he meant back in September when he said he needed more information before he made a decision. And when he put those things together, he put a value on bringing Steven Stamkos back, knowing some of these other moves he wanted to do, and that was a number he wasn't going to budge off it. So could he have found it? Yeah, he could have. The easy way out would have been to find the additional $2.5 million per year, maybe on a 4-year deal to keep him here. But he didn't budge. He didn't budge from it. He didn't move from it, and that's where the cold part of the business goes in. This will eventually go away. Steven Stamkos will be welcome back. I saw the first date is October 28th when he's going to be in with Nashville. He'll get a warm reception. His number will go to the rafters. We'll all forget about this, and we'll celebrate what Steven Stamkos was. But right now it does feel pretty cold.
With Erik Erlendsson, Lightning insider and host of a Lightning Insider Hockey podcast. And then coincidentally, because I've seen the reporting today, obviously Hedman and company were working on a deal for quite some time. Yet he locks in 4 years, $8 million, like the exact same deal that Stamkos got in Nashville, which is pretty wild when you look at it. And do you think there's a chance at a minimum? Again, a lot of the heavy lifting would have been done prior to yesterday, and it had already been shelved. But do you think there's a chance Hedman saw the way BriseBois and the Lightning handled Stamkos and maybe told his agent, don't mess around here. I might be next. If they offer something, just do it because I don't want to leave.
I didn't get that sense because I know that I think as soon as the season ended, I think, Stamkos was obviously the first guy they were going to talk about, but Hedman was number two because, let's face it, a guy who plays 24, 25 minutes a night in the role that Victor Hedman does, they're more they're more sought after in this league. So I don't think they were looking to let that part get away from them. So I think Victor Hedman was just as much a priority. And look, Hedman and Stamkos are really, really tight. They're really good friends. They talk. They know. I don't get the sense that Hedman said, "Oh, I don't want to have to deal with that this way." I think it was just organic the way everything came together. They prioritized making sure Hedman didn't get away. But as guys talk, I'm sure Stamkos knew that this was in the works, and he's probably thinking to himself, "Wait a second, Victor Hedman, I love him. He's getting a raise off of his last contract, and they're asking me to take a massive pay cut." So then, you start to see some of the things align on how we got to where we're at right now.
Well, it's never a slow day down in Tampa or in the state of Florida for that matter. I mean, here we are up in Toronto. We're in the epicenter of the hockey world, and we're constantly talking about the Lightning and the Panthers and the state of Florida. It's been a pretty good run for you guys down there, Erik. I'm sure it's fun to cover. We appreciate you doing this. Thank you.
Hey, my pleasure. Anytime. Be well.
You got it. Yep, Erik Erlendsson covering the Lightning. So there you go. And he's right. I mean, Hedman, that's a priority. It has to be. As much as Stamkos is still a really good player with 40 goals, really good. Gensel is a guy you can bring in, and I think he can be as effective this year, if not more effective, 5-on-5, a little bit younger. Stamkos can still skate, but Gensel's a play driver even at 5-on-5 still.
What if they have the same amount of goals and same amount of points this year? What if it's 40 goals for both? What if Stamkos has 40 and Gensel has 33?
That'll be the compare and contrast.
That could be
right?
That could be the case. But here's the thing now with the Atlantic: Toronto's still going to be Toronto. Florida's not going anywhere. Boston's going to be better. Tampa's going to be, better or the same.
They'll be good.
It's still that 4-pack. I don't know if Tampa goes back to contender. They also brought in Ryan McDonough, by the way. They improved their blue line for sure.
An older Ryan McDonough, though, right? Then they trade out Sergachev. The D is going to be really interesting for me. And it feels like they're trying to get a little bit younger, just to try to keep those guys going. Because Braden Point's not that old. We know, Cirelli's not that old. Tampa, you get Moser. You bring in Gensel, who's 5-6 years younger than Stamkos. Trying to kind of do it on the fly. I kind of get it. I know it's hard, but for fans, the Tampa fans, but I do get it.
Yeah, and again, I'm not shedding tears for a franchise that's won this. They've won 3 cups in 20 years. You know what I mean? And they've been to the Cup final. They were there in 13. They were there 3 years in a row. And even with Stamkos leaving, you still have Kucherov and Point and Hedman and Vasilevsky and Cooper still there. You're not selling your season tickets, right, or getting rid of them because Stamkos is leaving. I understand the emotional attachment. I totally get that. 16 years is an eternity, and he represented the turn, right? Like Marty St. Louis, Vinny, Brad Richards, like those teams in the early 2000s with Tortorella, they won the Cup in 2004, and then lockout hit, got ugly there. Stamkos, Hedman represented change. But 16 years is a long time. It's a great run down there in Tampa. And I'm curious to see what Stamkos does in Nashville. Nashville is a team that historically has never been known as an offensive juggernaut. It's always great goalie, good defenseman. And they bring in Marchessault, they bring in Stamkos, they bring in Brady Shea. I mean, those are offensive players, right? So they're trying to rev it up there with Andrew Burnett behind the bench.
Well, and that's the right coach. It feels like that's the right coach to have, with those types of guys. Look what he did with Florida when they were that, high-flying team. Yes, it didn't go as expected or as they wanted in the playoffs, but high-scoring team in the regular season, won a President's Trophy. And he took that Nashville team last year and got them to the playoffs with guys that were on, value deals. And Ryan O'Reilly, first-line center, making $4.5 million. You give Gus Nyquist a 2-year deal at 3.1. 2/3 of your first line was making a combined $7.5 million last year.
Pretty good.
And they were good, and they were in the playoffs. And now
out.
you add Stamkos and Marchessault. Like, you have to think there's, that's got to be 60 goals combined between those two guys at least.
Yeah.
And winners.
I mean, yeah.
They've won cups, right? So I think that makes a difference. They know what it feels like, what it looks like.
Yeah. Now it's also someone's got to get him the puck. Like Stamkos isn't going to have, Kucherov feeding him anymore. So that's pretty substantial. And, Marchessault got a lot of opportunity with a lot of good players in Vegas. So they're still going to score just because of how good they are. But I think both will scale back a little bit. But if you're Nashville, you're hoping it's just a little bit as opposed to a lot. And I don't think it'll be a lot. All right, Mike Johnson still to come. Confirm or deny coming up. Jays in action tonight. The Euros continue as well. We're almost into the quarters, or I guess we are officially into the quarters now. And yeah, it's Copa America week as well, where Canada's back in action on Friday night. So we'll start looking ahead to that match. Jason Strudwick in here, Frankie Corrado. I'm Bryan Hayes. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. All right, something to chew on brought to you by Boston Pizza, Canada's favorite sports bar. Summer's short, so make sure you make the most of patio season at BP. Join us for a long lunch or a late night. See you for a pint on a patio soon. We just talked about Stamkos and how maybe he feels like he got jobbed a little bit down in Tampa. That is a consistent theme around pro sports because it sounds as if Klay Thompson, for the last 12 months, maybe more than that, not happy with the Golden State Warriors, not feeling like the Warriors showed him enough respect for everything he did for that team. It was the Splash Brothers. It was Steph and him. Like, that was the beginning of everything. And obviously they kept Steph. They kept Draymond. They made sure Steve Kerr was sticking around, although that has no impact on the trade on the salary cap. But Klay, you're out, man. You got to go. And he's down in Dallas, and he's chasing rings now with Luka. And
he's in a good spot too.
Yeah, he is.
You know what I mean? Like he's still got an opportunity to chase a championship, and Golden State wasn't exactly doing that the last few years. So. Like that should be a little bit of a rejuvenation for a player like that who was, seemingly every year chasing a ring in the finals, big playoff runs. Like I don't know. I guess you want to be where you are, but that's a pretty good spot for him to be.
I agree. And we're asking online who will hold or who should hold a bigger grudge against their former team. Is it Stamkos or Klay? And right now, 80% of the vote is saying Stamkos. I think I'd agree with that because Klay left and is still making like so much money in Dallas. And, Dallas was just in the finals. Nashville, they were in the finals in 16, I think it was. Nashville's a good team, but I think Dallas is a better team. Like Stamkos not only left, but he left to a team that good team, not great team. think Klay's got a better chance of getting things done here. And also, Klay wasn't the man. Like, Stamkos was, I guess, what Steph Curry, is in Golden State, closer to that in terms of the face of the franchise, the captain. Klay wasn't that in Golden State. Great player, beloved there, right? Number retired, all that kind of stuff. Maybe a statue, who knows? But I'd lean Stamkos.
Statue
What are you
guy.
throwing around statues?
Statue could be.
Can you
I
remind
could see
me?
that. I could see a full statue set up at Golden State
Klay?
with Steph, Draymond, Klay,
Okay.
Steve Kerr. How about the four of them? That's what I'm saying. Put all four of them out
Just
there.
refresh my memory, because this comes around, every so often. Are you liberal with your statue giving out, or are you like more, you really have to earn it?
No,
Which side are you on?
I think you really got to earn it.
Okay.
And I understand that's going to sound like I'm contradicting myself here, because Klay's a great player. He's not like an all-time iconic figure. But like, they were so much like that's a dynasty. Like, let's use the Oilers, the 80s Oilers. Strud, you're from Edmonton. Would Messier be statue worthy, or is it just Gretzky? Like, only Gretzky. If Messier had one, what would you say?
Well, I mean, I think it takes a little bit of the shine off the statue thing. Like, I think statues are for the best, the greatest of all time, right?
Right.
I still think that, you got to be really careful with how you hand out statues.
It's a hall with some plaques in there. Stop playing that. I love the hall. Here I am.
A firm
I love
handshake.
the Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
Yeah, where's the teleprompter? I need to Biden this, end quote. I need to just read a statement here and just get everything back on the rails. Listen, Klay Thompson's not statue-worthy in terms of, like, the bigger picture of basketball history. Neither is Steven Stamkos in terms of the hockey world. But in their individual markets, obviously they had a great run, and there was so much winning. But yes, I'm not overly liberal with statues. Generally, it should be a truly iconic figure. Yet, not to get, but Dustin Brown has a statue in L.A.
Significant with the organization, Stanley
exactly.
Cups,
winning, and
captain.
Chris Neal's jersey's retired in Ottawa.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, there's some examples where you're like, that's interesting.
Great guys.
Great guys, and beloved where they played.
Yeah, for sure.
Beloved where they played.
And it's hard if you're not in the market to understand what they mean, right? So if that's how they're feeling, then go for it.
Struddy just missed out on a statue. He just missed out.
I think it's still coming.
It's coming.
After I die, they'll just like, we got to get this guy memorialized. Holding a big Slurpee.
We will. The Spengler Cup. Where was the Spengler when you played in it? That's
big
where the statue's going to be.
Well, see you later.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Hour 2 coming up. Overdrive brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Jason Strudwick, Frankie Corrado, I'm Bryan Hayes. Mike Johnson confirm or deny in the next hour. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN Plus.